welcome to the Final Gambit. I am Kalmir, your host for today. Here we have students all the way from TAF. They're from De La Salle University. I know that they're quite busy, but I am very happy and grateful that they get to be here with us. Guys, please introduce yourselves.
Hi guys, I'm Yara and I am taking up Bachelor of Science in Human Biology.
Hi guys, I'm Martin and I'm also taking Bachelor of Science in Human Biology.
Hello, I'm Iris, and like Yara and Martin, I'm also taking up BS Human Biology.
So, for this episode, we are going to talk about game theory and its application specifically on the timely Russo-Ukrainian War. On February 24, Russia attacked Ukraine. The current conflict is a profound catastrophe that demonstrates the extent to which some Russian officials are eager to exercise power over the Ukrainian people. The purpose of the video was to use game theory to anticipate the confrontation between Russia and West. But first, we must know that what game theory really is. Yara, take it away.
So, game theory is an interactive strategic decision-making where situations are called games and the participants are called players. Think of it as your normal everyday game, wherein the objective is to achieve the best outcome or maximum payoff for the players. Ultimately, we can see that this is how wars are structured. Relating it to the video, game theory is the application of tactical choices, also known as wins and losses, between the two sides of the conflict mentioned, Putin and the West.
Thanks for that, Yara. And to better understand, game theory has four aspects: players, rules, consequences, and payoffs. Players are the participants of the game that executes a set of moves called strategy. Accordingly, the game follows a set of rules and has corresponding consequences and payoffs that depend on the player's choice of actions.
So, how exactly does this game theory apply to the war? Does anyone know?
So, if I may, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, is regarded as the protagonist or player one, while the West, one of Ukraine's allies and the provider of its defense systems, is the antagonist, the adversary, or player two. Putin's strategy involves starting a war with Ukraine instead of maintaining the status quo, which left the West with two choices: to impose sanctions against Russia and help Ukraine's military, or yield. The West chose the former, and from here we can assess Putin's next move in response. Will he escalate the crisis further, or will it result to a negotiated settlement? However, it remains to be seen if the West will equal Putin's escalation of the fight or allow him to prevail. On the other hand, since the West do not want to imply that all Putin needs to do to get what he wants is to use force and violence, but they wouldn't really want there to be any direct conflict against Russia, the West only continues to push back against Putin's acts in retaliation by aiding Ukraine with more military support.
So, using the game theory, it can be predicted that Putin's last action would be to choose a protracted war to attain his military objectives. In response, the West would choose to accept Putin's victory to stop the bloodshed.
We can then infer that the consequences for both sides, with Russia being faced with global isolation and the West lost in the ongoing war, are risks they were willing to take to achieve each of their own maximum payoffs.
With these observations, there is then a possibility that both nations would reach a compromise wherein Ukraine would be split into two: the East and the West, dividing the nation into two separate territories controlled by Putin and NATO respectively.
Well, that's interesting. Now that we're done with the technical part, what are your thoughts on the situation?
So for me, although Russia's military buildup on the Ukrainian border is a geopolitical issue, it is ultimately a moral one. The war has an impact on actual human life. People have fallen and people have lost. It saddens me that every time we are met with a crisis, not just in the context of war, it is the poor and marginalized, the people who are the first to feel the effects of the actions and decisions of the powerful. The actions of Russia are a reflection of its pride and greed, and its aggression towards Ukraine is a transgression of justice.
I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiments, Iris. It's kind of frustrating, really, to see how something as unnecessary as wars takes so many lives. Why do the powerful feel the need to take over territories as if they're collecting only bags and shoes and trophies? This is the question that's been on my mind as we discuss this topic. And I also wonder, they want to play as kings, queens, and gods when most of us just really want to live. The never-ending tug-of-war for power and control breeds the evil that kills this world slowly, especially when it is taken through violence.
For me, the occurrence of war is not a linear concept. Battling and going through hell for the sole purpose of becoming the victor is not its fundamental motive. It encompasses the clamor of vast threads of historical narratives, cultural backgrounds, and dynamic themes that seems to reflect the necessary penetration of basic human morality. In this perspective, wars are depictions of a needed reality, a necessary evil for the sake of something good, or some might say. However, as necessary as war may seem to some in the presence of non-negotiable conflicts, its aftermath should never be seen as a form of investment. Lives and the various damaging societal shifts are not expenditures for conflict-induced violence. Indeed, in their nature, nothing good comes out of wars. Violence is never a concrete solution to problems that require the acknowledgement of human rights and dignity. And, ironically enough, they never bring peace.
Personally, war for me has and will always be chaotic. It's a cycle of violence that just keeps repeating. And as for this, I think this war is Putin's war and his choice alone. His greed has been negatively affecting the Ukrainian community and even detrimental to his country. Additionally, I believe that Ukraine certainly deserves the support from the West. The trauma can never be taken away from the people. One of the effective things I think we can do is to pull up resources and distribute them to the people so they can survive somehow. After such devastating events, they need to have the assurance that they're safe and their lives are secured in every aspect.
I stand by what you said, Kulmir, and adding to that, I also think that providing psychological and emotional support to the affected communities is also vital to alleviate the mental turmoil brought on by the war. Accordingly, this important aspect can be touched upon through pioneering and funding programs aligned with this kind of support.
Such programs can be in the form of free counseling and other healthcare services, as well as the implementation of many recreational activities that people can partake in. Also, I think it is important for the government to undergo the necessary preparations should this risk become imminent once more. I think perhaps this is the most important thing that they can do. Maybe they can also reflect on their past mistakes by revising some laws, studying the country's economy, dismantling the corrupt system, and reviewing treaties or negotiations with other countries to ensure the citizens' resilience and survival no matter the catastrophe.
It's nice hearing your insights about the war. Now I am curious, what do you think about the analysis?
So I personally think that it's interesting that we can predict the actions of other people based on their best interests. The beginning, which was what actually occurred, has been adequately explained. But the same cannot be said for the predictions, as there are a lot more choices than A5, in my opinion. I believe that there are many other possibilities not taken into account from the perspective of game theory. The possibility of a guerrilla war or the likelihood that the Russian troops may find themselves in a situation where they cannot advance, retreat, or be supplied, among others, is not taken into account by the speaker. The problem with game theory is the assumption that those reading the game know exactly what options exist. In the case of war, they or we don't know.
That's a good point. But if we are to consider Russia's economic and military development and the way Putin was willing to go into this war as someone who knows the state of his country very well because he is its leader, for me, I can see why the narrator in the video structured his analysis like that. It seems like all of this started because Putin wanted to prevent NATO's expansion, so this is the status quo. And they didn't want Ukraine to become more powerful than it already is by joining them. Maybe he was scared that they would be able to take over Russia if that happened. But regardless of the reason, he was faced with two general choices: to escalate the conflict or to back out from a war that he started. Here, the maximum payoff for him would be to attain his initial objectives, regardless of the collateral damage he would experience. Humiliation, defeat, wasted lives, and resources. If he would retreat, what can he gain? Nothing close to attaining the control and power that he wanted enough to start this war in the first place. He also already displayed a disregard for the lives that will be lost. So, therefore, in my opinion, the narrator's predictions are justified.
And adding to what Yara stated, the analysis also pointed out the most beneficial courses of action by the West in response to Russia's moves, which grounds the analysis further. Similar to how Russia can either escalate or de-escalate the situation, the core of the West's reactions revolves around either responding to it or not, and supporting Ukraine or directly joining the war, which I think are the most possible paths for them. This is because these counter-responses are aligned with their current political disposition. They are in the middle of being indirectly and directly involved in the conflict. Hence, the most likely options were to respond, aid Ukraine, join the war directly, or do nothing at all, as these actions would significantly change the trajectory of the war. Although the point Aris mentioned regarding the binomial restraints on the choices brought by the game theory is undoubtedly evident, it narrows down the dominant actions for both parties to streamline strategies that would provide them with distinct and significant payoffs. In this sense, game theory was used to identify the things that are most likely to happen in a more synthesized manner, allowing the predictions to be objectively justified despite being mere assumptions.
The analysis just points out that Putin has got a lot of pride up on his sleeves, in my opinion. Strategy-wise, deciding to take on a full-blast war is not something I agree with. Regarding to what Yara said, that the narrator's prediction is justified, I don't think I can support that analysis because I believe that if he could only see the suffering that Putin is causing with each bomb that lands on the ground, and not just focus on military victory, the analysis he presented wouldn't have the same structure. So that's quite a debate. Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and ideas about this topic.
Thank you also. This has been a very fruitful conversation and we've learned a lot about the different perspectives regarding the Russo-Ukrainian war and the analysis grounded on game theory.
I'm sure the listeners also appreciate the great points raised by us in this discussion. So tune in for more and we'll see you on the next one. This is the Final Gambit, Animal Assault. Leave cheeses in our hearts
forever.
Bye guys.
Bye.